During World War II, the National Association for the Advancement of Colored People launched a widely publicized Double V campaign against the twin evils of fascism and racism. It was their hope that the racism of the Nazis would open American eyes to inequality at home. When Harry Truman became president, he brought an ambivalence about race not uncommon to politicians of his day. Despite personal uncertainties about racial equality, however, Truman made civil rights part of his domestic agenda at great political cost. In 1946, Truman established the President's Committee on Civil Rights and supported its controversial 1947 report to secure these rights. Truman's most significant civil rights achievement was the desegregation of the military.
In 1941, some of the finest American fighter pilots took on the fight for a double victory against oppression abroad and racism at home. They call themselves Red Tails.
We're as patriotic as anybody else. We wanted our chance to prove that we could do something.
Your nation calls on you to die for your country and you can't even sit down in a restaurant. It's not a pleasant feeling when you look and think, what am I volunteering to die for?
I really didn't care whether it was segregated or not. I wanted to fly.
Admission into the cadet training program required at least 2 years of college, at a time when fewer than 1% of African Americans had a college degree. Academically, they truly were the best of the best. By the end of World War II, the Red Tails had flown more than 1,500 missions, shooting down a total of 112 enemy aircraft, including Nazi Germany's first jet fighters.
I saw these streaks coming. Instead of going this way, I went down, turned the plane upside down, went down under the bombers, and I caught one of the jets just as he was coming in to shoot down the B-17.
Back home in America, top brass personally decorated the group's pilots.
It was a time in history we should be very proud of. We set the star very, very high for anybody who's following us. We changed the world.
The double victory had yet to be won.
At home and abroad, American leaders reinforced the notion that the Cold War was a fight to protect the free world. At the same time, during the 1940s and 1950s, the repressive and violent racism of the South and institutional racism throughout the nation contradicted U.S. foreign policy rhetoric. Conservative citizens groups and politicians justified racism by equating civil rights with radical liberalism and communism. Despite these strident voices, a slowly growing national consensus about the importance of civil rights in the fight against the world communist conspiracy emerged in the post-war years. For many white Americans, pragmatic responses to racial inequality grew into genuine humanitarian concerns as they learned more about their fellow African American citizens from their war experiences and from the national media spotlight thrown on exceptional African American individuals such as Jackie Roosevelt Robinson. When Robinson walked on the field wearing a Dodgers uniform, he took center stage in an early battle to win American hearts and minds in the battle against racism. Other black players soon followed Robinson into the major leagues. In the coming years, African Americans used sports and entertainment to cross the color line and win the admiration of white fans who often became allies in the fight for racial equality. For African Americans, the oppressive ironies of the Cold War South seemed unbearable. African Americans had served the U.S. with great distinction during World War II. They were treated as heroes in France and other liberated countries where, often for the first time in their lives, they were identified as Americans rather than simply blacks. Southern African Americans fought for freedom during World War II, knowing freedom at home only as an ideal never fully realized. Despite wartime civil rights efforts like the Double V campaign, veterans came home to a segregated Southern power structure as racist as the one they had left. Revelations of Nazi racism and the Holocaust drew global attention to the brutal realities of racial hatred in all its forms. In the American South, however, black veterans discovered that civil rights activists were branded as subversives in the Southern media, linked with communism, hounded by FBI and other federal officials, and even murdered by fellow Americans. Stories of black veterans being beaten, gunned down, or lynched after simply attempting to register to vote became international news. Veterans like Medgar and Charles Evers, who spoke out about the absurdity and moral perversion of racism in a country fighting for global freedom, faced coercion and violence from all levels of Southern authorities and the resurgent Ku Klux Klan. Medgar Evers repeatedly tried to register to vote, only to be chased by a violent mob threatening death. Stories like these disturbed a growing number of white Americans while providing a powerful ammunition to the Soviets and anti-American forces around the globe. In the early years of the Cold War, civil rights was part of a global movement of oppressed people searching for freedom in a post-colonial world. American racism posed a serious problem for Cold War efforts to win the loyalty of the non-white Third World. Global ideological competition with the Soviet Union required America's political leaders to demonstrate the appeal of American life in opposition to the communist system. The existence of Jim Crow put America at a decided disadvantage, forcing reluctant national leaders to take a stand against segregation in the next decade in the name of national security, if not decency and respect. The treatment of African Americans during World War II and the early Cold War demonstrated to the world the nature and extent of American racism. Within the U.S., a migration of African Americans during and after the war forced millions of Americans into closer contact with blacks and made it increasingly difficult to think of racism as simply a Southern issue. Between 1946 and the 1960s, many African American Southerners, responding to disheartening post-war racism, fled the South for new opportunities in booming cities of the North and West. But practical concerns also prompted migration. The perfection of a mechanical cotton picker in 1944 effectively ended the sharecropping system that had for so long locked a large percentage of Southern blacks into a cycle of poverty and debt. Out-migrations toward wartime opportunities in places like the West also undermined the system. Despite wartime movement and a major migration in the earlier part of the century, 77% of African Americans still lived in the South at the beginning of World War II. 49% of those lived in the rural South. By 1970, only half of America's African Americans lived in the South. The rest were concentrated in urban areas in the North and West. In the 1940s, the demographic character of cities and industries changed, and angry whites worried about the effect of race and cheap black labor on the character of their communities. Often they responded with violence. In the spring of 1943, race riots in Harlem killed 5 people, injured 400, and caused millions in damage. Similar riots in Detroit led to significant violence, creating lasting racial tensions in the city that came to represent the best and worst possibilities of the black migration. In many cases, white Southern workers who had migrated north to work in war industry clashed with blacks who did the same. Across the nation, white neighborhoods responded with racial covenants or redlining of cities, creating a de facto system of segregation enforced by markets, if not by law. But between 1945 and 1952, progress in civil rights built a foundation for dramatic expansion of the movement that would occur in the 1950s and 1960s, when civil rights moved to the center of American politics and became part of a broader struggle to redefine American culture and values.
Me and my wife run all over town. Everywhere we go, the people would turn us down, Lord, and the bourgeois down. He's the bourgeois down. I got the bourgeois blues, gonna spreading years all around. Me and Martin, upstairs, I heard a white man say, I don't want no niggas up there, Lord, he's a bourgeois man. He's bourgeois town. I got the bourgeois blues gonna spread in you all around. Home of the brave, land of the free. I don't want to be mistreated by no bourgeoisie, Lord, in a bourgeois town. He's a bourgeois bourgeois town. I got the bourgeois blues, I'm gonna spread the news all around. Everywhere we go, the colored people will turn us down, Lord, in a bourgeois town. It's a bourgeois town. I got the bourgeois blues, I'm gonna spread the news all around. The white folks in Washington, they know how. Chunk of color man, a nigga just to see him ball, Lord, it's a bourgeois town. It's a bourgeois town. I got the bourgeois blues, I'm gonna spread the news all around. Tell all the colored folks to listen to me. Don't try to buy no home in Washington, D.C., cause there's a bourgeois town. It's a bourgeois town. I got the bourgeois blues and I'm so gonna spread the news.